The United States has struck Iran. The United States Central Command has officially confirmed that strikes were carried out against Iran. America has never disgraced itself like this. The United States of America is withdrawing its troops from countries neighboring Iran, just as Tehran demanded. Although Trump himself insists that Iran is simply begging him to finally sign a final peace agreement. The United States of America intends to reconsider its military presence in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. The Wall Street Journal reports this, citing the U.S. military command. Washington in particular is considering the possibility of relocating its military bases westward, farther from the range of Iranian missiles and drones. Just listen to that, it's basically flight from the battlefield. In addition, satellite images have emerged showing more serious damage to the Navy base in Bahrain than the United States has officially acknowledged. In fact, this indicates that the US has agreed to comply with Iran's demands to withdraw troops from the region. It has also become known that the US plans to relocate all these bases to Israel. And against this backdrop, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, stated that Iran attacked ships in the Hormuz Strait, launching at least 4 kamikaze strike drones at them. This happened on June 26. In other words, Iran has effectively broken the ceasefire. The United Nations even suspended efforts to evacuate more than 11,000 sailors who found themselves in distress in the Hormuz Strait. Well, that's because the fighting started again, and Sudan is being hit again. But Donald Trump immediately made it clear that there would be no consequences for Iran because of this. Let's discuss in this episode how Trump is gradually fulfilling all of Iran's demands, and I'm sorry to say, how shamefully he is withdrawing American troops from the region. My name is Alexi Pichi, and let's discuss this topic together calmly, without unnecessary emotions. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like this episode, and leave any comment under this video. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Peachy News. The link to it is in the description of this video. And before we start the main part of this episode, I'll record an update that came in after this video was recorded. And it is that the US has struck Iran. The US Central Command has officially confirmed that strikes were carried out against Iran. This happened late at night, local time. The statement from Central Command says that the strikes were carried out in response to Iran's attack on a commercial vessel transiting through the Strait of Hormuz. We will talk about this vessel in today's broadcast. Next, I'll quote the United States Central Command. American aircraft struck Iranian missile and drone storage sites as well as coastal radar stations. After Iran struck the cargo ship Ever Flowly with a one-way kamikaze drone on June 25, the US military also stated that Iran's dangerous behavior has undermined freedom of navigation at a time when trade volumes through this vital international corridor continue to grow. And here's another quote. US Central Command forces continue to coordinate safe passage and support for commercial vessels transiting the strait. The US military maintains its presence and vigilance to ensure that all aspects of the agreement with Iran are observed, implemented, and fully enforced. This happened at night on the night of June 27, so from here on, we are discussing the events that took place before that. And believe me, the fact that the US struck Iran does not change the context or the essence of this episode at all, because Trump still decided to redeploy some of his troops from the Middle East. So, after this update, the main part of this episode continues. So, I'll start this episode with the latest news. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, stated that Iran attacked ships in the Hormuz Strait, launching at least 4 kamikaze strike drones at them. Next is a quote from the American president. One of the drones hit the upper deck of a large and very expensive cargo ship. It was damaged but was able to continue its journey. We shot down the other 3 drones. Obviously, this is reckless behavior. In the news report about the ceasefire. And that's all. Earlier, it was reported that on June 25, the Taiwanese vessel Ever Lowly, sailing under the Singaporean flag, was attacked in the Strait of Hormuz while following a sea route different from the one insisted upon by Iran. Well, that is, the Strait of Hormuz is kind of open, but only in a way Iran accepts. And if someone deviates from Tehran's conditions, that vessel becomes a target for attack by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. But Donald Trump insists that he managed to fully open the strait, which, let me remind you, was actually open even before the war. This was the first such incident after the United States and Iran signed a Memorandum of Understanding on June 18, which provides for a 60-day ceasefire and the start of negotiations on a long-term peaceful settlement, including discussion of the Iranian nuclear program. I emphasize only discussion. The nuclear program, I emphasize only discussion. One of the conditions of the agreement was specifically the restoration of free navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. At the same time, Iran insisted that ships choose routes close to its coast and obtain prior permission to pass. That is, Iran says we have opened the Strait of Hormuz, but ships will only sail the way we say. In turn, the US proposed following the route on the Omani side of the strait under the protection of the American military. So, the Taiwanese ship tried to pass along the Omani coast through the corridor designated by the United States of America. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps launched 4 drones at this ship. One of them hit the vessel. And Donald Trump says, well, it happens. What can you do? On June 26, Iran turned away 3 foreign tankers that tried to pass through the strait without permission and warned that there would be no guaranteed safety for ships choosing alternative routes, including the route the Americans are talking about. Earlier, Trump stated that if Tehran does not fulfill the conditions of the temporary agreement, including ensuring free passage through the Hormuz Strait, then the US may resume strikes on the territory of the Republic of Iran. But the same Trump made it clear today that Iran will not face any consequences for this. And instead, Donald Trump stated that Iran, quote, is desperately asking him to make a deal with the United States. Trump lashed out at the American media, which, according to him, claimed that Iran is much stronger today than it was 4 months ago. In particular, Trump mentioned the New York Times, ABC News, NBC News, CBS, and CNN, calling them fake news and fading publications. Next, I'll quote Trump. They actually claimed for a while that it wasn't really working, and that Iran is much stronger today than it was 4 months ago. Just think about that. They don't have a navy, they don't have an air force, and yet they say those guys have become stronger. They're desperate to make a deal. They are far behind us in many ways. They should have been dealt with during that 47-year period when they ruled through terror, and that's exactly what they did. They ruled through terror. And now, according to my calculations, Trump has claimed for the 3rd time in the last 2 days that Iran is making some kind of major concessions. But he still hasn't specified what exactly those concessions are. Meanwhile, it's the US that's actively making concessions, unthinkable and shameful ones at that. The United States of America is preparing to withdraw American troops from Saudi Arabia and Kuwait since they are within the strike range of the Islamic Republic of Iran's missile arsenal. Let me remind you, at the beginning of the war, Trump assured everyone that he would destroy Iran's missile program. The Wall Street Journal writes that the US is reconsidering the placement of its military bases in the Middle East after Iranian strikes on American facilities. According to the Wall Street Journal, one of the most affected was the base of the US Navy's 5th Fleet in Bahrain. According to the publication, a new satellite image showed serious destruction. Command centers and at least 12 other buildings were damaged. The newspaper analyzed satellite images, videos from social networks, and spoke with current and former American military personnel. It is noted here that the base in Bahrain, a US military base, is only 240 kilometers from Iran and has remained one of the key American locations in the region for many years. It is from here that the US coordinates part of its naval operations in the Persian Gulf, from combating arms smuggling to protecting commercial vessels. And according to the Wall Street Journal, the strikes hit piers, administrative buildings, and warehouse facilities. The headquarters of the 5th Fleet suffered the most. One official stated that the building can no longer be used. and just its restoration alone is estimated at around $200 million. The US Navy Security Service training building has been completely destroyed. The emergency services warehouses, the freshwater reservoir, the cafeteria, the residential buildings, and other military base facilities have also been damaged. The total damage is estimated at $386 million. And I emphasize, this is only the cost of restoring the buildings, not including the equipment and machinery inside, and this is just for one military base in the region. For the United States, the base in Bahrain is one of the most important facilities in the Middle East. This is the only American military base in the region where the families of service members live. Well, basically, it's a self-contained restricted town with a school, restaurants, sports grounds, and so on. Experts believe that the attack revealed the weak points of the old infrastructure. The base was built decades ago, when Iran did not yet have modern missiles and strike drones. John Miller, a former infrastructure commander at an American military base in the Middle East, admitted that if the base were designed today, many decisions would differ. And now, after the strikes on Bahrain and damage to about 20 more American facilities in the region, Washington has begun to reconsider its military strategy in this region. Now pay attention. Right now, several options are being discussed at once: to restore the base in Bahrain, to reduce the military presence in Kurdistan, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia, and to move part of the military forces further away from the range of Iranian missiles. Just listen closely. The United States of America wants to move its troops further away from Iran, which, according to Donald Trump, doesn't even have an army anymore. He says, "We destroyed their navy, destroyed their army, they have nothing left, but we're going to move our troops further away from Iran because they're within range of Iranian missiles." I just kept quiet. I'm not even mentioning that at the start of the war, Trump, foaming at the mouth and wearing a stylish Make America Great Again cap, declared that he would destroy Iran's missile program to dust, that not a single missile would be left with the Iranians. That's how things turned out. And I'll also add that during the negotiations, the Iranians insisted that one of the conditions for a ceasefire was that the Americans move a little further away from Iran itself. And among the possible new locations for the deployment of American forces in the region, Israel is being considered. So the idea is that American troops move further away from Iran and relocate to Israel. In addition, according to the Wall Street Journal, some of the damaged facilities in Bahrain may not be restored at all. Instead, command centers will definitely be moved underground, and some of the military infrastructure, what do you think they'll do with it? They'll distribute it to other regional countries, just move it further away. And now, the representative of the US Central Command, Tim Hawkins, stated that as a result of the strikes, no one was killed, and the operation of the military base in Bahrain was not seriously disrupted. Although we can see that it was actually quite serious. According to him, during the war, the main task was to protect people, and the American military managed to do that. Against the backdrop of these statements and discussions, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio met in Bahrain with the foreign ministers of the Persian Gulf countries, and they issued a joint statement regarding the US deal with Iran. I have a separate episode on this topic on this YouTube channel. I recommend you go and watch it to be fully up to date. That's it. And as a result of that meeting of the Council of the Arab States of the Gulf, all sides stated that they intend to strengthen coordination in the field of security and continue joint efforts to contain Iran. But this sounds a bit ridiculous considering that the US is planning to move troops farther away from Iran, but will supposedly contain Iran in the future. Although, of course, there are also certain benefits from this temporary truce that are tangible for both sides. Well, perhaps the most tangible benefit for the United States from the Memorandum of Understanding is that Iran is reopening the Hormuz Strait. Not completely, but it is reopening it. In recent days, ship traffic through the Hormuz Strait has increased sharply. And according to the company Kepler, which monitors activity using transponders and satellite data, on Wednesday, here are the latest data for Wednesday, there were 70 crossings, meaning 70 tankers passed through the strait. This is more than double the figure for Tuesday, although it is still less than it was before the war began. Before the war began, more than 100 ships and tankers passed through the strait each day. But the strait is not fully open. Iran still requires authorization for transit through the northern corridor of the channel, that is, closer to its shores. And as we can see, if someone chooses another route, Iran attacks these vessels with impunity. And Trump does nothing about it, he just states the fact. Just the other day he said, well, the Iranians hit the vessel. We have recorded this. This is a violation of the ceasefire. And that's it, the strait, period. However, the increase in tanker traffic is an encouraging step toward normalizing global oil flows. We can see that oil prices are indeed going down. It's already at $70 per barrel, that's the psychological threshold. That's why the situation is improving here. But let me remind you once again that before the war, the Hormuz Strait was completely open. There were absolutely no problems. No one coordinated the movement there at all. But that's not all. The good news about the strait reopening comes with the caveat that Iran can start selling its oil again. And unlike the period before the war, after the US Treasury Department lifted the sanctions, Iran can literally sell its oil to anyone, to absolutely everyone, including the United States of America. Here's another moment when Trump says that all this is fake news, claiming that Iran has become stronger. It's all lies. Look, the Strait of Hormuz before the war. It wasn't controlled by Iran at all, now it is controlled. And before the war, Iran was under oil sanctions and could only sell it to China. As a result, China knew it was the only buyer and demanded huge discounts. Now Iran can sell its oil to anyone at all, to anyone it wants. And accordingly, make money from it. The question is, has Iran become stronger in these two aspects than it was before the war? I think so, yes. But Trump doesn't think so. He says it's all an illusion. You just don't understand. Well, let me remind you that about a week and a half ago, Trump said that the Hormuz Strait has always been open. He said it was open almost the entire war. You just didn't notice. He says we actually opened it long ago and were already escorting ships. Well, and now, many critics fear that Iran will quickly try to rebuild its destroyed army, replenish its stock of drones and missiles, and also revive the threat from its network of proxies, which includes Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen. And there's another point which again concerns the question of whether Iran has become stronger or not. Iran insists that it will not agree to a long-term deal until it gains access to more than $100 billion in assets frozen in banks around the world. Last week, American officials said that the frozen funds would not be released until Iran fulfills its obligations. But Iran says, listen, we're not going to do anything at all until you unfreeze our money. And in the Memorandum of Understanding, it says that Iran's frozen funds and assets will be fully available for use by the Central Bank of Iran, but it doesn't specify the timing or the scale. But the key point is that it says fully available. So in fact, there's already a kind of trap laid, meaning that Iran has the right to demand the unfreezing of all its assets. Not 12 billion, not 24 billion, but more than $100 billion. The question is, has Iran become stronger in this situation or not? The fact they can demand this is already an indicator. In addition, the agreement also provides for the creation of an investment fund of $300 billion, which could help the country recover. The agreement provides for the final lifting of sanctions against Iran, which will allow it to trade freely with the rest of the world. That is, the removal of all sanctions. Also this week, Trump stated that UN nuclear inspectors from the IAEA will be allowed access to Iran permanently. Iran stated that it is not going to let any inspectors in. There was actually a funny incident here. Let me briefly remind you of the chronology. First, J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, stated that during negotiations in Switzerland with the Iranian delegation, we agreed that as early as tomorrow, IAEA inspectors would be sent to Iran. Iran agreed to let them in. And the inspection of all nuclear facilities begins. After that, Iranian officials come out and say, no, listen, this is nonsense. We didn't promise anything. We are not going to allow any IAEA inspectors onto our territory. After that, Donald Trump came out and said that no, Iran agreed to let IAEA inspectors in. Iran came out and said again that no, we do not agree. And after that, Donald Trump says, well, you understand that sooner or later Iran will agree anyway. I have a question. Before that, Vance and Trump's statement that Iran had already agreed, what was that? Can we call it a lie, a cynical and blatant one? In addition, the Memorandum of Understanding requires an immediate and final cessation of hostilities on all fronts, including Lebanon. But let's be honest, as long as Hezbollah is in Lebanon, Israel will not stop, will not withdraw its troops, and will not cease its operations to ensure its own security. Moreover, Israel does not consider itself bound by this agreement between the US and Iran. The Trump administration and Netanyahu's team do not hide their strong emotions about the end of the war. And Israel's persistent assertion of maintaining freedom of action to protect its own security in Lebanon and throughout the Middle East will become a test of Trump's authority as US-Iran negotiations deepen. And Iran will almost certainly make it clear that it now has new trump cards in its hands. Global trump cards. This is the threat of closing the Strait of Hormuz at any moment. I emphasize, Iran did not have this trump card before the war began on February 28, 2026. So the question is fake news, as Trump calls it, lying, or is Trump lying? Write your opinion in the comments. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinion and your conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so financially with any donation or by subscribing to the private community on the Patreon platform. All the links and details are in the description of this video. Check them out, subscribe, and support. I would be grateful for that. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Bye, everyone.